This morning, we're continuing our conversation about mental health. This is not a one-size-fits-all, affecting all ethnicities and cultures, especially within the Asian community.
Yeah, according to the National Library of Medicine, Asian Americans demonstrated lower rates of any type of mental health-related service than the rest of any other population.
Yeah.
KPRC2 associate producer Kait Catuiza joins us now in Studio A to discuss her own experience with mental health. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming on this side of the fence to share with us your story. You know, first I want to talk a little bit about your family. Where is your family from?
So my mom and dad both immigrated from the Philippines back in the 90s. My dad came here when he was in his teens, and then my mom came to the Philippines like in her 20s. And so definitely my dad came here straight from a small island in the Philippines. He did not know English very well. So it was definitely a culture shock for him. My mom, she grew up in Manila, which is the capital. So she was able to get that English as a second language.
Had that influence prior.
Yeah, for sure. And so she came here knowing a little bit more, and then they met here in Houston actually at work.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And so growing up, you felt like you had kind of like a mixed culture upbringing?
A little bit, yeah. So my parents had that same like immigrant parent thinking, you know, the big American dream, you know, go to school and everything. And Work hard for sure. One of the things though, because my dad, he didn't know English when he came here, he didn't teach us, like my parents did not teach my siblings and I Tagalog, which is the native language of the Philippines. So like while I am, you know, growing up a Filipino American, proud of my heritage, there's just that part of my identity that I don't have that connection
That's
with.
Unfamiliar.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the second girl, so definitely there was a bunch of family in the house.
There they are.
Families are.
Yeah, and so that's common, I think, with immigrants who come to America. You know, they start learning to speak English so rapidly that they kind of drop that language, and that's kind of, I think, common across a lot of different cultures. Another thing that we hear that's kind of common is just stigmatizing mental health, right? And so it's viewed as something that's weak and shameful in some cultures.
We're not going to talk about it.
You do not talk about it, yeah. So when did you realize that this was something that you were struggling with, and how were you able to speak up? Because I'm sure it wasn't easy in your family.
Yeah, I think this was something that I've always been dealing with. You know, they say it doesn't come out of the blue. Growing up, I was a very quiet and shy kid at school. Definitely did not say a lot of words. In elementary school, I definitely was riddled with anxiety. You know, my parents would drop me off at school, and I would be crying in the morning because I didn't want to be there. I was so scared. And so there was a point when I was in middle school where I kind of started digressing like from my studies. You know, like my parents have always raised me to do good in school, because doing good in school is what will get you that really good start in your career. And so there was a point where I was just like, I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to focus on my studies. You know, I was pulling back from like even my friends and from my siblings. You know, my older sister and younger sister, they're very close. And so being that other child, you know, I'm one of 4, but my brother, you know, we didn't really get along growing up. And then having like my 2 sisters be the ones closer together, I definitely felt like an outsider, you know. And then there was in 7th grade when I was 13, that's when I had kind of like a breaking point. You know, I was like putting too much pressure on myself. I wasn't living up to the expectations of what my parents were hoping, you know, I would do. My older sister was a very great student, and you know, so was I, but at one point it was just like, you know, I couldn't handle it.
So when you talk about a breaking point, are you talking about, did you have a panic attack? Was there a depressive episode? What did you experience?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety at 13, and there was one point where it was like a cloud. That's all I can really describe it. It was like a cloud over my brain, and you know, my teachers could tell. And there was a teacher that, you know, thankfully they, you know, picked up on that. You know, they're like, her grades are slipping, and you know, she asked me, you know, hey, is like something going on at home? It's like, no, I have like very loving and supportive parents. Like there's nothing going on at home. It was just like me putting so much pressure on myself and being so self-critical of not living up to these ideas that my parents had in mind for me, and you know, comparing myself to everybody around me. And then after that, I had my first, panic attack for sure when she did confront me, and she didn't do it out of malice. It was, out of worry. Yeah. And so my counselors, they brought my parents in, and it was a whole deal.
What was that conversation like to include your parents on this diagnosis?
It's definitely a foreign word for them. It's definitely taboo. My mom and dad, they were like, no, like, she's fine. Like, this is just like a phase, because I was like 13. So it's like, oh, she's going through that teenage phase. But, my doctors, they were like, no, this is something that is like a condition that she needs like help for. And so convincing them to reach out and find me a good support team, outside of like my family, my mental counselors and my doctors, my psychiatrists and therapists, finding the right people. And my parents, they found an Asian psychiatrist as well. So having her explain no, this is something that can happen to kids, especially because 13 is like, you're just barely starting in life.
Age. Yeah. It's a tough age.
And so they did help you find help even at 13. They were at least open-minded to that, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
It does sound like your family's very loving. It's just that this is a taboo topic for a lot of different cultures.
It's weird to talk about with my parents. Like, I still get worried that some of these things I can't bring up to them. Sometimes just because I don't want them to judge me. They I obviously love my parents and everything, but sometimes the expectations and stuff that they have because of that, American immigrant, idea is just a lot to encompass and everything. And so it definitely took a lot of convincing. I know my mom, for sure, she kind of felt guilty a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember when I was
As moms
originally
often do,
diagnosed, they had me out of school for like a week, and I just went on a shopping spree with my mom because that's what she thought would help me, if that makes sense.
She was trying to help, yeah.
Yeah, so she was like, oh, maybe new clothes and a new hairstyle, really figuring what I liked and my confidence and spending that one-on-one time with her. She really tried when we first were going through this.
Well, those are easy things to do if you are going through a situational depression, after a breakup and things like that. Those are good things to do to help pep somebody up. But I guess yours was something that was much deeper and probably, a mental health condition that you can't help. That is a diagnosable condition that needs to be treated just like anything else physical in your body.
Yeah, and I started going to therapy, at that really young age. There was one point where I would go every day. And my first few sessions literally did not say anything to the therapist. And she's a really nice lady. Love her, Miss Amanda, if she's watching. Shout out to her because she really helped me through some of my toughest times. And having access to a therapist, someone else to talk to, someone who actually understands the things I'm going through and can help me figure out, the coping mechanisms was really awesome, as a teenager. And even now, I still reach out to her, when I do have those episodes and those moments in my life where I'm going through really tough mental health few weeks. I'm really struggling here. I need to go see a therapist, and I go see my psychiatrist pretty regularly too.
Anyone listening right now can benefit from your story, and so we're so appreciative of you sharing your story with us. But speaking directly to members of the Asian community, to young women, to what do you want them to take away from this? People who feel isolated, people who feel that they can't come forward with this conversation because of whatever barriers they feel are in place around them.
Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of acceptance. That's what I had to learn, looking at myself in the mirror, it is a mental illness, but it's not bad. That's kind of how I kind of had to think of it that way, and it's okay to have your struggles, and it's okay to reach out for help. I know that's something very taboo in Asian culture, is everything is very private. And so going and admitting to yourself, I need help. I need to reach out to
It's okay.
a doctor.
It takes some self-reflection because the immediate response is, well, I don't have a problem.
Right.
It takes some self-reflection to discover, like, what areas could I use help with, or what areas could I use help? Just maybe even if that's identifying where is this problem coming from.
And that
Sometimes
is healthy.
That is the self-reflection.
And that is healthy, doing that, asking yourself those
Yeah.
questions. Having that self-dialogue, right? Talking to yourself at the mirror is okay.
It's been great having you on. Is there anything
Yes.
else that you'd
Thank
like
you.
people to know specifically about mental health and the Asian community?
You know, eventually when I do have a family, I definitely want to keep that in mind, talking to my kids and, you know, having that conversation with your parents if you are a child of Asian immigrant parents, and you want to be honest with them. You know, it's going to be hard, but it will be better in the long run.
Anything's possible, not impossible. Okay. Well, Kait,
All right,
thank
great.
you so much for sharing your story with us.
It was great having you on, Kate. We appreciate it. And we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.